All right, everyone. So Brock Lesnar reportedly is going to be at WrestleMania and WrestleMania 41 and the Royal Rumble. This is according to WrestleVote. So we don't know this is confirmed, but what we do now know is that the whole John Cena Brock Lesnar match, it was all setting up for Brock Lesnar to have a big run. There's been reports about potentially Braun Breaker being one of those opponents. But the reason that he had the squash match against John Cena, right, because it's basically what it was, where he just dominated John Cena, is because they want to build this out. They want to build this out and have him as the monster. And to be honest with you, that makes me hate that John Cena match even more. And it's for two reasons. The first is because this is John Cena's retirement tour. And I understand the idea of you giving back to the business, okay? But the thing I can't wrap my head around is we saw this with Undertaker's streak, and now we see it with John Cena. Is Brock Lesnar continues to be on the receiving end of people, in their kind of last few matches, giving back to the business to build him up. Why exactly does he need any more building up? Brock Lesnar does not need anyone else to say, "Oh yeah, this guy's a badass." Everybody, I mean, when he could have returned, it didn't have to be to return against Cena. He could have returned against anybody, had the same reaction, and you don't need to build that in. That's the part I don't get. Is this isn't like we're having Braun Breaker do it, right? Even if you agree or disagree, it's like, okay, Braun Breaker is someone who you need to keep building up his star, right? You need to keep delivering it. My problem here is Brock doesn't need that. We already every time this guy comes back, we feel the same way about it in terms of yeah, and that's just the bottom line. I don't understand why it continues to have this thing where no, we need to build Brock's character. It's like, no, you don't. It's there, right? It's already been built. This is his whole character. The second part of that is that it didn't work. You know, nobody was like, "Oh, wow, that was really good character building, really good story building." Now we think Brock is 10 times more of a badass than we did before. And the part that infuriates me the most is that we've actually seen in the past them do this right. I don't remember the exact years. I'm gonna guess somewhere in the 2010s, like the early 2010s. I'm gonna guess. But I remember there was a phase where Brock, it was obviously, after UFC, and he was kind of going through this thing where he was doing a lot more of the, punches and kicks and kind of submission maneuvers and stuff like that. And so they had a match where he obliterated John Cena, right? I mean, he was punching him in the face over and over again, just destroying him, putting him in submission moves, and it was a domination. And I remember watching that, and I was like, that was the most brutal thing I've ever seen. Okay, that was so brutal in terms of with no, like it wasn't a Hell in the Cell match or some, anything like that. It was such a brutal match that they had him, just beat up John Cena, and it did give off honestly that vibe of like, oh my god, that was holy crap. The problem is this time around, it was all done by the F5, right? It was all done by him doing his finishing maneuver over and over, and it didn't give you that same like you didn't get that same feel that we got from that initial match. So on one hand, you didn't need to build up John Cena versus Brock for this reason. And the second reason is we've seen this done better in the past. And so now we kind of expect that if you're going to do it that way, and we didn't get it. And actually, as I'm making this video, I'm thinking of a third reason. The third reason is you didn't build any story, meaning you could have had Brock Lesnar beat John Cena on his farewell tour. I have no problem with the idea of a Brock Lesnar John Cena one off match just so we get to see it again on the farewell tour. The problem is there wasn't a ton of build to this thing. Brock came back and then he was kind of fighting Cena. There wasn't like this long drawn out build or anything like that. So I just think they could have, and I understand with all the legal issues, they couldn't exactly say, oh, he could be here in the beginning of the year. I think that's when there was more like, I think that's when WWE legal was saying he couldn't come back and all of that. So certainly that kind of throws, a wrench into the plans if he can't come back and now you have to bring him back. I just think it was so poorly done all around. And it's weird because it's one of those things where it was poorly done, but I'm still happy we got to see Brock and John Cena wrestle again. I am happy about that. But it's the frustrating part. So now it moves in to him being booked for two more events, and hopefully they do this right. The part that concerns me is that you could have had a Brock Lesnar return, outside of the Cena storyline, and I think people would be pumped. But I feel like now what we're actually getting is we're getting a John Cena, or we're getting a Brock Lesnar return that's starting with kind of a negative view, because everyone's like, this was a bad start, right? This isn't what we wanted to see. And I think that could hinder, all of the future storylines. But if he goes after, Braun Breaker, sure, right? That makes sense. Whoever he goes after next, and I want to see him at Rumble. I would love to see him at WrestleMania. It's just frustrating because it feels like this is like a layup that they just kind of, you had a wide open layup on the fast break and you missed it. That's really what this feels like. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.